As of today, we have three major operating systems that own the industry: Windows, Macintosh, and Linux. Actually, Linux isn't technically an operating system, it's a kernel. Oh, as of today, we have three major operating systems that own the industry: Windows, Macintosh, and different operating systems that run Linux as their kernel. Actually, those aren't operating systems, they're called distributions or distros for short. Dude, would you just shut the f? I wanted to make this video for a long time, but two things held me back. First, I was afraid of the most devout part of the Linux community. And second, honestly, I didn't really know Linux back then. But I learned, studied, and researched. This is going to be a nuanced piece, and as someone who genuinely believes in Linux's promise, believes in the competition it has to offer for the sake of consumers, and believes it'll finally kick some sense into Microsoft, I need to point out the opportunities with Linux and what we can do as a community. So we're gonna look into this from the lens of your average computer user. A decade ago, I started dual booting Ubuntu and Windows on every single one of my machines rather than running it on VMware. Due to Microsoft's continued bullshittery, I then decided to get rid of Windows entirely. Well, mostly. My two main devices run the latest version of Fedora Linux, and whenever I need to run Windows, I just pass through my GPU to a Windows VM and it works splendidly more than 90% of the time. When Linux works as intended, it works outstandingly. Seriously, I can't put it into words. The performance, the simplicity, the control, the lack of bloatware, the absence of telemetry, and of course, the terminal. However, when it doesn't, that's when you want to pull your hair out and drink bleach. First, the commands. Most of the things you want to do in Linux, you'll need a command. You type the command in the terminal and press enter. For example, let's say you need to install VLC. You might think all you have to do is type sudo apt-get install VLC, but no. VLC uses a different package manager called snap. So you first have to install snap, then fetch the VLC package. It's not a big deal for tech users, but for beginners, it's not exactly the executable solution where you just double-click the exe file and voila. When talking about the terminal commands, syntax is extremely important. Linux is case sensitive. Luckily, if you mistype something, most distros now know what you mean and they'll suggest the correct command, which is a godsend. However, the devs do update the syntax of these commands periodically or change some package or repository names. So if you're following, let's say, a video tutorial on YouTube or a guide online or even typing an old command from memory, it might not work. If you're a beginner, you'll have no idea why. For example, I was following this guide for GPU pass-through and I copied the command and pasted it, but I got an error. Now, I knew this was a syntax error and I just put the space between these two words, which fixed my issue. But you can see how that might be frustrating. We can go on and on about terminal challenges, but for now, let's move on to something different. The sudo problem. The superuser has the highest privileges available in Linux. If you want to install something or access something that you don't have the authorization for, you'll have to ask superuser for permission. That's all fine and good, but there were instances where I was trying to install something as superuser and I was still told that I didn't have the permissions. I then set those specific permissions as root and still had the same error. Occasionally, when prompted, I entered my password in the terminal and it said my password was wrong. Sometimes switch user gave you an error. Now, there is a correct sequence of steps you have to follow, but you get my point. When doing a simple thing, it takes you to forums. I remember just recently I installed Ubuntu on a virtual machine and it literally bricked after I did the update command and restarted. Let's talk about the Grub bootloader. Sometimes it can have problem recognizing other OS installations even after scanning the entries with the appropriate command. The bootloader has definitely improved a lot over the years. I remember a couple of years back, Grub kept messing up my Kali and Ubuntu installation, but that laptop had 6 different operating systems on it. Finally, one of the most important issues that I came across was restoration. I had a fresh installation of Fedora, kept using it for around 3 weeks, and then I decided to make a complete backup with Timeshift. So one day I updated the system and the VFIO wasn't working. It restored the original driver configuration. I tried updating the configuration back to how it was, but it wouldn't work anymore. I then restored the entire system with Timeshift. The process was successful, but I wasn't able to launch my QEMU and virtual machines anymore. It would just give me a cryptic error. Looked online, but nothing. Up until now, this might have seemed like a rant about Linux from yours truly. But I wanted to set the stage before addressing the biggest problem in my opinion. I think it's the die-hard part of the community. Every time you mention Windows or Macintosh, they jump in saying stuff that ranges from "it's your fault to choose Windows, you deserve what you get" to superiority complex where they'll nitpick even the most insignificant detail to utmost hostility. At the same time, however, the biggest strength of Linux is the most passionate part of its community. These are people that go out of their way to help others and make Linux the open source utopia that it is. They help people get into these distros. They empathize with these people that are having difficulty learning the ropes. I'm so proud of countless people on GitHub, YouTube, and forums advocating for Linux and doing whatever they can to help our community thrive. I want to point out two channels in specific: Blandman Studios and SysGuides. I made my very first GPU accelerated VM on my laptop and my PC based on the guides of Blandman Studios. I'm sure anyone who's familiar with Linux might be thinking, oh, you just need to do that thing A, or you just need to adjust that setting B. It's actually easy. I agree. But for Linux to be more successful and more widely adopted, we need to acknowledge its challenges as well so we can address them, drive its usage, encourage users to switch permanently, and give Microsoft a reality check that it desperately needs. So, what can we do? If you have a platform, try to highlight Linux. If you're a dev, consider contributing to the project. If you're a user, consider donating to the distros you like. But most importantly, encourage people and empathize with those who are looking for a better alternative. Thanks for your support, guys. Please like and subscribe because...
Oh man, this is feeling so freaking safe. I love it. I feel so safe, it's like I'm nestled in my mother's bosom. We can go do that after this, sir. Together. What?
This is Rogue Hat. Catch you guys later. Seriously, I'm getting tired of uninstalling the Windows Copilot 365. Why the fuck do you keep getting on my computer?